Welcome to History Explained, where we illuminate the past to better understand our present. I'm your guide to your daily journey through the past to empower the future. Today is Saturday, June 14, 2025. As we do every Saturday, we're exploring a pivotal military engagement that altered the course of history and demonstrated how a single day's fighting could reshape the destiny of nations. Today, we turn our attention to the Battle of Waterloo, fought on June 18, 1815, which marked the final defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte and ended over 2 decades of revolutionary and Napoleonic warfare that had convulsed Europe. This decisive engagement not only sealed Napoleon's fate but established the European balance of power that would endure for nearly a century. What makes the Battle of Waterloo particularly fascinating is how it represented the culmination of military innovations, coalition warfare, and strategic decision-making that had evolved throughout the Napoleonic era. The battle demonstrated how factors ranging from weather and timing to leadership and logistics could determine the outcome of conflicts with continent-spanning consequences. So let's explore this climactic moment in European history, examining Napoleon's return from exile, the formation of the final coalition against him, the dramatic events of June 18, 1815, and the profound consequences that followed for Europe and the world. The Battle of Waterloo cannot be understood without examining Napoleon's remarkable return from exile on the island of Elba. The 100 days that preceded Waterloo began on March 1, 1815, when Napoleon landed near Cannes with fewer than 1,000 men, determined to reclaim his empire and restore French glory. Napoleon's escape from Elba had been carefully planned, taking advantage of the restored Bourbon monarchies in popularity and the economic difficulties facing post-war France. King Louis XVIII's government had struggled to satisfy both returning émigrés seeking to reclaim their properties and revolutionary veterans who feared losing their gains from the previous quarter-century of upheaval. The speed of Napoleon's march to Paris demonstrated his continued hold over French popular imagination and military loyalty. Regiment after regiment sent to arrest him instead joined his cause, culminating in Marshal Ney's famous promise to bring Napoleon back to Paris, in an iron cage, before himself rallying to the emperor's banner. By March 20th, Napoleon had reached Paris and reclaimed power without firing a shot, forcing Louis XVIII to flee to Belgium. However, this bloodless restoration immediately triggered the formation of the Seventh Coalition, as European powers refused to accept Napoleon's return and began mobilizing for what they hoped would be the final campaign against French hegemony. The coalition assembled against Napoleon represented the most formidable alliance he had ever faced. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia committed to providing over 600,000 troops for a coordinated offensive designed to overwhelm French resistance through sheer numerical superiority and simultaneous attacks from multiple directions. Wellington's Anglo-Dutch army of approximately 68,000 men was positioned in Belgium, while Blucher's Prussian force of 117,000 occupied positions to the east. Austrian and Russian armies were approaching from the south and east respectively, creating a strategic situation where Napoleon faced enemies on all fronts with limited time to achieve decisive results before overwhelming force could be brought against him. Napoleon's strategic situation required bold action and rapid victory. With roughly 125,000 men available for immediate operations, he needed to defeat his enemies piecemeal before they could concentrate their superior numbers. His plan called for driving a wedge between Wellington and Blucher, defeating each army separately before turning to face the approaching Austrian and Russian forces. The campaign began on June 15 when Napoleon crossed the Belgian frontier, achieving initial surprise against the scattered Allied forces. His rapid advance caught both Wellington and Blucher off guard, demonstrating that the emperor retained his strategic brilliance and ability to seize the initiative even in desperate circumstances. On June 16, Napoleon fought simultaneous battles at Ligny against the Prussians and Quatre Bras against the Anglo-Dutch forces. At Ligny, Napoleon personally led the assault that defeated Blucher's army, wounding the Prussian commander and forcing his forces to retreat. However, the victory was incomplete, as the Prussians maintained their cohesion and withdrew in good order rather than disintegrating. Meanwhile, at Quatre Bras, Marshal Ney's attack against Wellington's advance guard resulted in a bloody stalemate that prevented the British commander from supporting Blucher but also failed to achieve the decisive victory Napoleon needed. These partial successes left Napoleon with tactical advantages but failed to achieve the strategic breakthrough required for ultimate victory. Wellington, recognizing his exposed position after Blucher's defeat, withdrew his army to previously reconnoitered defensive positions near the village of Waterloo. This ridge position offered excellent defensive terrain with a reverse slope that could protect his troops from French artillery while providing clear fields of fire against attacking infantry. The morning of June 18 dawned wet and muddy after heavy rains the previous night. This seemingly minor meteorological detail would prove crucial to the battle's outcome, as the waterlogged ground delayed Napoleon's attack and made cavalry charges less effective while impeding the movement of artillery. Napoleon's battle plan called for a massive artillery bombardment followed by infantry and cavalry attacks designed to break Wellington's line and force a general retreat. With approximately 72,000 men and 246 guns, Napoleon possessed slight numerical superiority over Wellington's 68,000 troops and 156 artillery pieces, though the Emperor's advantage was less overwhelming than in many of his previous victories. The battle began around 11:30 a.m. with a diversionary attack by Napoleon's brother Jérôme against the Château of Hougoumont on Wellington's right flank. This fortified position, defended by British guards and German troops, became the scene of brutal fighting that continued throughout the day but failed to achieve its objective of drawing Wellington's reserves away from his center. Napoleon's main assault began with the Grand Battery of 80 guns bombarding Wellington's ridge position. However, the muddy ground reduced the effectiveness of artillery fire, while Wellington's use of reverse slope positions protected many of his troops from the bombardment's full impact. The first major infantry attack, led by Count d'Erlin's First Corps, advanced against Wellington's left center around 1:30 p.m. This massive column of 16,000 men represented Napoleon's attempt to achieve a decisive breakthrough, but the attack was poorly coordinated and met by devastating defensive fire from British infantry formed in line. The failure of d'Erlin's attack was followed by repeated cavalry charges led by Marshal Ney, who mistakenly believed Wellington's army was beginning to retreat. These magnificent but ultimately futile charges by French heavy cavalry demonstrated both the courage of Napoleon's troops and the tactical limitations of mounted attacks against well-formed infantry squares supported by artillery. Throughout the afternoon, the battle's outcome remained uncertain as both armies suffered enormous casualties while maintaining their positions. Wellington's polyglot force, comprising British, Dutch, Belgian, and German troops, demonstrated remarkable resilience under pressure, while Napoleon's veterans fought with the desperate courage of men who knew their emperor's fate hung in the balance. The crucial moment came with the arrival of Blucher's Prussians on Napoleon's right flank around 4:30 p.m. Despite his defeat at Ligny and a grueling march through muddy terrain, the 72-year-old Prussian commander had kept his promise to support Wellington, bringing 50,000 fresh troops to the battlefield at the decisive moment. Napoleon's final gamble came with the deployment of his Imperial Guard, the elite veterans who had never suffered defeat in battle. Led by the Emperor himself, this attack represented his last chance to break Wellington's line before Prussian reinforcements could tip the balance irreversibly against French forces. The repulse of the Imperial Guard around 7:30 p.m. marked the psychological turning point of the battle. The sight of Napoleon's most elite troops retreating in disorder shattered French morale while inspiring Allied forces to launch their own counterattacks. Wellington's famous order to advance, "The whole line will advance," signaled the beginning of the French collapse. The retreat quickly became a rout as Napoleon's exhausted and demoralized army streamed away from the battlefield in disorder. Only the sacrifice of the Imperial Guard's rearguard actions prevented complete annihilation, allowing some French forces to escape the disaster while Napoleon himself fled toward Paris. The casualties at Waterloo reflected the battle's intensity and decisive nature. Combined losses totaled approximately 65,000 men, with French casualties particularly severe due to their unsuccessful attacks and disorderly retreat. Wellington himself noted that it had been the nearest run thing you ever saw in your life, emphasizing how close Napoleon had come to achieving victory despite ultimately suffering decisive defeat. The immediate consequences of Waterloo were swift and final. Napoleon's political support collapsed as news of the defeat reached Paris, forcing his second abdication on June 22. This time, there would be no return from exile, as the British ensured his permanent isolation on the remote South Atlantic island of St. Helena. The Congress of Vienna, which had been disrupted by Napoleon's return, reconvened to finalize the post-war settlement that would govern European affairs for the remainder of the 19th century. The Concert of Europe established principles of collective security and balance of power that prevented major continental wars until the outbreak of World War I in 1914. Waterloo's strategic significance extended beyond ending Napoleon's career to establishing British global dominance that would characterize the 19th century. With French power broken and continental rivals exhausted by decades of warfare, Britain emerged as the world's dominant naval and economic power, ushering in the era of Pax Britannica. The battle also marked the culmination of military developments that had evolved throughout the Napoleonic Wars. The combination of professional armies, citizen soldiers, coalition warfare, and improved artillery and small arms that characterized Waterloo would influence military thinking and organization throughout the 19th century. Wellington's defensive tactics at Waterloo, particularly his use of reverse slopes and combined arms coordination, became models for later military doctrine. Similarly, the importance of coalition unity and coordinated strategy demonstrated at Waterloo influenced subsequent approaches to alliance warfare and international military cooperation. The Battle of Waterloo stands as one of history's most decisive engagements, ending over 2 decades of European warfare while establishing patterns of international relations that would endure for a century. The battle demonstrated how individual leadership, tactical innovation, and strategic cooperation could determine the fate of nations and empires. Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo marked not just the end of his personal ambitions but the conclusion of the revolutionary period that had begun in 1789. The conservative restoration that followed would dominate European politics until the revolutions of 1848, though the ideas and institutions of the revolutionary and Napoleonic eras would continue to influence political development throughout the 19th century. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the Battle of Waterloo and its decisive impact on European history. Tomorrow, we'll be back with our Innovations and Inventions episode where we'll be examining the development of the printing press and its revolutionary impact on knowledge, communication, and social change. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. What aspects of the Battle of Waterloo do you find most significant, and how do you think this decisive engagement shaped the course of European development? Let us know in the comments section below. Until next time, I'm your guide for History Explained, where we believe that understanding yesterday is the key to navigating tomorrow.